My fingers tightened around the edge of the Thanksgiving invitation, glossy, embossed, and utterly devoid of warmth. 2 years. 2 years since the accusation shattered my life, 2 years since I, Luna Vance, was branded a thief and saboteur by my own family. The tremors weren't just from the chill of the autumn air. They were the echo of fury and a steely resolve that had become my constant companion. This year, the only thing I was serving was the truth, and it would leave a bitter taste far from the traditional Thanksgiving feast of turkey and cranberry sauce. It all started on a Tuesday that felt like any other, a crisp October morning promising nothing but routine at Vance Industries. I was finalizing the budget for the Fusion Initiative, a promising but smaller-scale R&D project I was passionate about, tucked away in my office, a space I'd poured countless hours into. The air hummed with the quiet efficiency of the tech world when the door burst open. My father, Robert Vance, the man who built this empire, stood there, his face contorted with a betrayal that cut deeper than any anger I'd ever witnessed. His eyes, usually warm and full of pride when he looked at me, were cold, hard, and accusing. "How could you, Luna?" he choked out, his voice raw, throwing a financial report onto my desk. It skittered across the polished wood, landing with a clatter next to my project notes. "Depleting the R&D fund, taking $300,000 from the company, your own family's resources." He showed me fabricated transaction records, altered transfer confirmations from the R&D account proof. He said that I'd systematically siphoned funds, moving money into personal, untraceable accounts. I stared at the report, my blood running cold, the office air suddenly thick and suffocating. The evidence looked damning, horrifyingly real, but it wasn't. "Dad, that's insane. It's impossible, Someone set me up?" I scrambled from behind my desk, reaching for him, desperate for him to see the truth in my eyes in my panicked plea. He recoiled as if I carried a contagion, stepping back, his expression hardening further. "Eleanor discovered the discrepancies this morning," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Eleanor, my stepmother, his wife of 5 years. The woman who had glided into our lives after my mother's death, all grace and soothing words, seemingly filling the void left by a woman who was the heart and soul of Vance Industries as much as my father was the brains. She'd been doing a routine financial review of department budgets, she claimed, and stumbled upon my supposed theft. Her timing was, of course, impeccable, perfectly timed to coincide with the quarterly financial reporting period. "It's all here, Luna," he continued, gesturing at the report, the pain in his eyes replaced by a chilling resolve. "The account numbers, the transfer dates, the electronic trail traced directly back to your access codes. The funds are gone, $300,000 vanished, it's undeniable. But it's not real, it's forged. Dad, please, you have to believe me." I pleaded, my voice cracking. He wouldn't hear it. He turned away, his back a rigid line of disappointment and anger. "Security will escort you out," he said, his voice low and final. "Effective immediately, your access has been revoked. Don't contact anyone in the family until you confess and return every penny you took." That was the last time I spoke to him face to face for 2 agonizing years. He walked out, leaving me standing alone in my once sacred space, the report on my desk a monument to a lie. Security arrived moments later, their faces impassive, escorting me through the hushed, staring halls of the company I had dedicated my life to. My siblings, my twin brother Marcus and younger sister Chloe, offered no solace. Marcus, head of operations, the pragmatist, sent a brief, clipped text later that day. "Can't believe you do this, Luna. 300K? Seriously, Dad is devastated. Don't contact me." Chloe, my sensitive younger sister, simply vanished from my life, her phone going unanswered, her social media feeds a silent testament to her absence. I was adrift, cut off from everything I knew, consumed by a toxic mixture of despair, disbelief, and a white-hot rage that simmered just below the surface. I spent weeks holed up in my small apartment, the city outside a blur of indifference, the silence within deafening. I replayed every interaction with Eleanor, searching for clues I must have missed, blind spots in my trust. She had always been supportive, almost too supportive. Asking about the R&D budget, expressing concern about its security, always framed as innocent curiosity. I was drowning my sorrows in a quiet corner booth at a downtown diner weeks later, the aroma of stale coffee and fried food thick in the air. I barely noticed the world around me, muttering to myself about forged transfers, malicious audits, and a stepmother's betrayal, when a voice from the next booth cut through my haze. "Sounds like you need a better class of enemy." I looked up, startled. A woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper wit was watching me, a wry smile playing on her lips. She introduced herself as Sam, a private investigator. She'd heard enough of my disgruntled ramblings to be intrigued. That cynical encounter was the lifeline I desperately needed. It was the first crack in the impenetrable wall of despair I had built around myself. At our first official meeting in her cluttered, organized chaos of an office, a space filled with teetering stacks of paper, glowing computer screens, and the scent of strong coffee, Sam delved into the little I knew about Eleanor. "Eleanor Sterling, formerly Eleanor Thorne," Sam said, her gaze fixed on a file open on her largest monitor. "Married into Sterling Corp money before divorcing a decade ago. Nasty settlement, lost a lot. Then, conveniently, married into Vance Industries. A woman with a pattern, Luna." Sam saw what I had only intuitively felt, the holes in Eleanor's story. The convenient discovery, timed perfectly. The sudden, overwhelming appearance of the damning evidence, seemingly irrefutable. The perfect, tragic narrative Eleanor had woven for my father, the board, and the press, the brilliant but troubled daughter who stole from her own family. It was too clean, too calculated, too theatrical. Sam agreed to take the case, her eyes assessing me with a mixture of professional interest and something that might have been sympathy. "This is going to be messy, expensive, and potentially dangerous," she cautioned, her voice low and serious. "Eleanor plays to win, Luna, and she plays for keeps." The cost didn't matter. My life, my name, my family, they were worth more than any sum. "I don't care about the money," I told her, leaning forward, my voice fierce. "I want my name cleared, my father and siblings to see the truth, and Eleanor exposed for the viper she is. Whatever it takes." 18 long months crawled by, each day a test of my patience and resolve. Sam, with her network of contacts and quiet tenacity, started uncovering connections I couldn't have possibly imagined from my isolated corner of the world. She wasn't just investigating the R&D fund theft. She was digging into Eleanor's past, her finances, her communications since marrying my father. Then, unexpectedly, the Thanksgiving invitation arrived. Not a physical card, which would have been too direct, too obvious for Eleanor. It was a hesitant email forwarded by Chloe, the subject line simply, "Thanksgiving at Dad's." It felt less like an invitation and more like a challenge. Or perhaps a test. Whatever it was, it served as a stark reminder of what I had lost and what I was fighting for. It was time. Just as the thought solidified, a text message flashed on my phone from an unknown number. "Stay away from Thanksgiving. For your own good, consider this a final warning." My heart pounded against my ribs, but a grim smile touched my lips. Eleanor knew. She was nervous. Good. Moments later, a familiar contact ID flashed. Chloe. My sister. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not a single word exchanged. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "Luna." Her voice was hesitant, fragile, filled with a tentativeness that tore at my heart. "Can we talk?" "Please." I invited her over, surprised by the knot of anxiety and hope that tightened in my chest. She arrived looking different, wary, the sparkle in her eyes dimmed. She twisted her hands in her lap, unable to meet my gaze directly. I haven't believed it," she confessed finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not fully, about the R&D funds, about you taking the money." She finally looked up, her eyes searching mine, pleading for understanding. "But Eleanor's been different lately. Secretive, distant, and Marcus has been asking questions about the R&D budget, revisiting the old financial reports. He says some transfers look odd." It wasn't a full confession of belief, not yet, but it was something. A crack in the wall of silence and doubt that had separated us. It was a glimmer of hope in the long, dark tunnel I'd been navigating. I took a deep breath, fighting back the surge of emotion. "Come to Thanksgiving, Chloe," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Watch what happens. That's all I'm asking." She nodded, her eyes still searching mine. "Marcus. He might listen too. He's been troubled by how quickly everything went down, how final Dad was." As she left, a promise to try and talk to Marcus heavy between us, the anonymous text flashed again on my phone. Last warning. Let them watch. Let them worry. The truth was coming, whether they were ready for it or not. Sam's office was a testament to her work-organized chaos, multiple screens displaying intricate spreadsheets and timelines, and an air of quiet intensity that felt like the calm before a storm. Your stepmother leaves quite the digital footprint when she thinks no one's looking, Sam said, her fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up a complex web of transactions and communications. It wasn't just the R&D fund theft, although that was clearly orchestrated. Eleanor had been systematically diverting company funds through a series of shell companies tied to obscure offshore consulting firms, all masked within legitimate-looking project expenditures and operational costs. The pattern was eerily similar to the fabricated data used to frame me, using the same transaction types and coding structures. But this was real money disappearing from Vance Industries accounts, hundreds of thousands at a time. $300,000 funneled out over the past 2 years, Sam stated, pointing to a highlighted sum on one of the spreadsheets. In smaller increments than your case, disguised as fees for technical consulting, licensing agreements, and phantom equipment purchases. All untraceable unless you know exactly what you're looking for and have access to the original accounts. Every third Wednesday, Sam pointed to a recurring transaction on a separate screen, showing a calendar overlay with financial data points. Like clockwork, money flowing from Vance Industries accounts to firms linked back to Sterling Corp. Same method she used to frame you, using the R&D fund as cover, but on a slightly different scale, more consistent, less dramatic, trying to stay under the radar. She showed me emails from Eleanor's archived Vance Industries account, seemingly innocuous project updates and internal memos, but with encrypted attachments, Sam's tech contact was currently working on decrypting. Speaking of which, my phone buzzed. David, my ex. A brilliant, if sometimes socially awkward, data analyst who still owed me a favor from back in college, and maybe, just maybe, still had a soft spot for me. I put him on speakerphone. Luna, you are not going to believe this, he said, his voice buzzing with excitement, sounding exactly like the tech nerd I remembered. I cracked Eleanor's encrypted files. They weren't project data at all. They were communications. Detailed communications sent to Sterling Corp, discussing Vance Industries' financial vulnerabilities and how draining key funds like R&D could slow development and make us an easier target. And guess whose signature is on the preliminary communication from Sterling's side? My stomach clenched, a cold dread spreading through me. Eleanor's. Bingo, David confirmed. And guess who was CC'd? Connor Sterling, Eleanor's ex-husband, the head of Sterling Corp's M&A division. The betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined, reaching back into Eleanor's past, connecting her current life with her previous one in a sickening loop of calculated self-interest. This wasn't just about taking over Vance Industries. It was about systematically weakening it, making it ripe for the picking by her former family's company, the very people she had supposedly been wronged by. Framing me for the theft of $300,000 was just a small part of a larger plan, a way to discredit a potential threat and create a narrative of internal instability. Sam was already typing furiously, cross-referencing David's information with her own findings. This changes things, motive established, direct link to Sterling Corp and her ex-husband. This isn't just internal fraud, Luna. This is corporate sabotage. I spent the next hour on the phone, my hands shaking, the weight of this revelation pressing down on me. I drafted a carefully worded, anonymized summary of David's findings, focusing on the financial discrepancies and the link to Sterling Corp, and sent it to Marcus's confidential company email, referencing specific anomalies in the R&D budget transfers he might recognize as head of operations. If anyone could confirm the financial irregularities from within, it was him. A tense silence followed. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, a text back, short, direct, no emotion. Need to talk, now my place. Avoid being followed. It wasn't much, but it was Marcus, a crack in the wall of silence. Sam printed everything: bank records, communication logs, David's detailed decryption reports, flowcharts of the money trail leading to Sterling Corp. It filled a heavy briefcase. Eleanor's going to fight dirty, Luna, Sam warned, her expression grim. She'll discredit all of this, claim it's fabricated, the work of a disgruntled daughter. We need backup, witnesses, leverage. Already on it, David said, walking into the office carrying his own laptop and several hard drives. I've securely backed up everything across multiple encrypted cloud servers, and I've got a contact at the Financial Crimes Unit who owes me one. He's agreed to take an anonymous look at the initial transfer data Sam found. If it triggers any flags on their end, we might get official attention. Seeing David again felt strange, a ghost from a life before Eleanor. We ended things amicably enough. My dedication to my projects had left little time for anything else, and he'd understood. Now, here he was, risking his career, potentially his freedom, to help me. "Why are you doing this, David?" I asked quietly while Sam made additional copies of everything, the whirring of the copier a low drone in the background. He met my eyes, his gaze steady and earnest. "Because I saw what she did to you, Luna, how it broke you. And I know you'd never steal $300,000 from your family or the company. The Luna I knew lived and breathed Vance Industries. This isn't you. And someone needs to stand up for the truth." His words, simple and sincere, meant more to me than he could possibly know. My phone buzzed again, another anonymous text. The same number as before, last chance, walk away now. Or face the consequences. "We know you're digging," I showed it to Sam. "Save it," she said grimly, snapping a photo with her phone. "More evidence. And Luna," she looked at me, her eyes serious, "do not go anywhere alone until Thursday. Eleanor is getting desperate, and that makes her dangerous." Marcus's apartment was sparsely furnished, a reflection of his no-nonsense approach to life. The air felt thick with tension, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that had opened between us. He looked haggard, lines etched around his eyes I hadn't seen before, the corporate mask he usually wore replaced by a raw vulnerability. "I spent all night cross-referencing," he said, running a hand through his hair, the gesture weary. He gestured to his laptop screen, covered in spreadsheets and complex formulas. "The transfer dates, the amounts, the timing of the R&D fund depletion. It aligns perfectly with the communications you sent me. It looked like budget mismanagement, unexpected project costs. But with your data, it's clear it was planned, orchestrated." He slammed his fist on the coffee table, the sound sharp in the quiet room. How could I have been so blind? $300,000 missing from a key fund. How did I not dig deeper? "Because you weren't looking for betrayal, Marcus," I said softly, the words laced with the pain of my own realization. "None of us were, not from her. She was family." He poured us both coffee, his hands trembling slightly as he handed me the mug. The bitter taste was a stark contrast to the sweetness I'd once associated with family. "Dad. He won't believe it," he said, his voice low and heavy. "He's completely under her spell. She spent 2 years subtly convincing him you're unstable, vengeful, bitter about being passed over. She's blamed little company hiccups on your disruptive, past behavior." "We have proof, Marcus," I insisted, opening the briefcase, the weight of it grounding me. Bank records, communication logs, David's analysis, the financial trail, $300,000 funneled out of the R&D fund, and hundreds of thousands more from other budgets to accounts linked to Sterling Corp. This isn't speculation, it's evidence, irrefutable. He sifted through the papers, his face growing paler with each document. He paused on David's flowchart, tracing the lines of the money trail to Connor Sterling's name. Connor Sterling, her ex-husband. So this isn't just about control, it's about weakening us for them. And revenge. On Sterling Corp and on us, using Dad and the company as pawns. "And Chloe?" I asked, needing to know if she was truly with us. "Does she know the extent of it?" "She has her doubts, deep ones," he admitted. "She's been distant from Eleanor too. She agreed to come to Thanksgiving. Watch. I think she's hoping we're right. That you're innocent." Just then, his phone rang. We exchanged a quick, uneasy glance. He read the screen, his eyes widening in alarm. "It's Eleanor. She's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, citing critical financial instability at Vance Industries requiring immediate restructuring to prevent collapse." He looked at me, panicked. "She's creating the crisis, Luna, using the budget discrepancies and stock fluctuations as justification. She's going to try and push through something irreversible before Thanksgiving. Probably transfer key assets, tie everything up legally in offshore accounts before anyone can trace it back to her and Sterling. We need to stop her, I said, my mind racing. Sam's contact at the Financial Crimes Unit was a starting point, but it might take time for them to act. We needed more immediate leverage. Something to halt the board meeting, or at least buy us time. Just as I was formulating a plan, the doorbell rang. We exchanged a quick, uneasy glance. It was Chloe, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "I couldn't wait," she said, stepping inside, her gaze sweeping over the papers spread across the coffee table. "I need to know what's happening. Marcus mentioned an emergency meeting." She saw Eleanor's name, Sterling Corp., the flowchart of the missing funds. Her breath hitched. Is this why?" "It's proof, Chloe," Marcus said, his voice low and heavy. "Proof Luna was framed for the R&D fund theft. Proof Eleanor is systematically weakening us for Sterling Corp." For a moment, the three of us just looked at each other, the weight of 2 lost years and a brewing storm hanging in the air. The silence was broken only by the distant city sounds. "What do we do?" Chloe asked, her voice small but firm, her eyes locking onto mine. "We fight," I said, my voice gaining strength, the last vestiges of despair burning away, replaced by a fierce protectiveness for the siblings I had missed so deeply. Together, it was a promise, a pact, forged in the quiet tension of Marcus's apartment. Sam's contact had a lead, a former executive at Vance Industries named Frank, who had been quietly pushed out shortly after Eleanor's arrival. He had suspected something was wrong with various department budgets and some of the sudden changes in project funding. But his questions were shut down, and he was eventually sidelined. He agreed to meet us at a neutral location, a busy public library coffee shop, the murmur of conversations and the scent of old books providing a strange backdrop for our clandestine meeting. He was nervous, constantly glancing around, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Eleanor's ruthless," he muttered, sliding a small, encrypted drive across the table toward Sam. "She found out I knew about her side deals, with Sterling Corp tried to buy my silence with a hefty severance package, then threatened my family when I refused. Said she'd make sure I never worked in this industry again." The drive, he explained, contained archived financial reports and project budgets that hadn't been altered, showing the original allocation of funds, the expected expenses, and specifically, the untouched $300,000 in the R&D fund before the transfers began. It also had a recorded conversation he'd secretly made during his exit interview, where Eleanor, in a moment of arrogance, had outlined her plan to leverage the company's financial instability to force through changes beneficial to Sterling Corp, mentioning that creating minor financial disruptions and blaming internal mismanagement was part of the strategy. His motive for coming forward now? "She ruined my career. I lost everything. My reputation. My ability to provide for my family. I won't let her do the same to your family." And he added, his voice low, meeting my eyes, "I think your mother would have wanted the truth to come out. She built this company on integrity, not petty theft and sabotage. My mother, Caroline Vance. She died when I was in college. A sudden, unexpected illness that left a gaping hole in our lives. A void that Eleanor had seemingly glided into with effortless grace and charm. But my mother had always been sharp, intuitive, with an uncanny ability to read people and understand the heart of the company. What if she saw something in Eleanor, even back then, before any of us did?" As we left the library, merging back into the stream of city life, a news alert flashed on Marcus's phone. Vance Industries stock was fluctuating erratically, rumors of budget discrepancies and financial mismanagement circulating through the market. Eleanor's manufactured emergency was in full swing. "She's creating the crisis she needs to justify the restructuring to the board," David said, who had joined us at the library and was now walking alongside us, his phone open to financial news sites. "Using the fabricated $300K theft and other smaller discrepancies to paint a picture of instability. Once the board approves the transfer of assets, it's over," Chloe finished, her face pale. "Everything goes offshore. Untraceable. We'll lose whatever she hasn't already taken." We needed to get the uncorrupted financial data and the recording authenticated, and to Sam's contact at the Financial Crimes Unit immediately. But the emergency board meeting was called for 11:00 a.m. It was already 9:30 a.m. We had less than 90 minutes. We split up. Marcus and Chloe headed straight to the office, their mission to try and stall the meeting, throw any wrench they could into the proceedings, buy us time. David took the informant, Frank, and the drive containing the original data and the recording to meet his contact at the Financial Crimes Unit downtown. Their goal was to get an official investigation launched, or at least get a representative to the board, meeting to halt the proceedings. I was heading to Sam's office to prepare for whatever came next when my phone rang. My father. His name flashing on the screen brought with it a fresh wave of pain and longing. "Luna, where are you? Eleanor says you're stirring up trouble again, that you're trying to interfere with the emergency meeting." His voice was strained, accusatory. "Dad," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, "listen to me carefully. Go to the archives in accounting on the second floor at Vance Industries. You know the room. Access the archived R&D budget reports from 2 years ago, before I was removed. Compare the allocation and transfer records to the current ones Eleanor has presented." He was confused, his voice laced with impatience. "What are you talking about, Luna? I'm on my way to a critical board meeting. I don't have time for—" "Please, Dad," I pleaded, cutting him off, my voice breaking slightly. "For once, just trust me. Don't listen to Eleanor. Look at the original reports. Frank Anderson, he gave us copies. He can verify everything. Look at the original budget, Dad. Look at where the $300,000 was before the transfers, before you let Eleanor do anything at that meeting, before you sign anything." Silence stretched across the line, heavy and suffocating. I could hear the distant sounds of traffic, his uneven breathing. Then, a heavy sigh, the sound of a man caught between loyalties. "You have 30 minutes, Luna," he said, his voice weary, resigned. "That's all I can spare before the meeting starts. If you're not there, if you can't explain this, I'm going forward with Eleanor's plan." The line went dead. 30 minutes. 30 minutes to convince my father of a 2-year-long lie orchestrated by the woman he loved. A lie that cost me my life and the company $300,000 and potentially much more. David arrived at the office building just as Marcus and Chloe were locked in a heated discussion with a harried security guard, trying desperately to gain access to the restricted accounting archives now. David flashed something that looked official, perhaps his financial crimes contacts badge or a hastily acquired temporary clearance, and suddenly, the path was clear. They raced through the gleaming corporate lobby, the hushed efficiency of the building a stark contrast to the desperate urgency of their mission. The elevator ride felt agonizingly slow, each floor a tick of the clock counting down to the emergency meeting. When the doors opened on the executive floor, the scene was tense. Board members milled nervously outside the conference room, glancing at their watches, their faces etched with concern over the fluctuating stock prices and rumors. Whispers filled the air, rumors of the crisis, of the necessary restructuring. Eleanor stood by the entrance, a picture of controlled concern, a slight, anxious smile playing on her lips. She was holding court, calming nerves, her voice a low, soothing murmur, until she saw me step off the elevator, followed closely by Sam and David. Her composure fractured instantly. Her eyes widened, her smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated fury. "Luna, you're not authorized to be here," she exclaimed, her voice sharp, cutting through the murmurs. She took a step towards me, her hand outstretched as if to physically bar my entry. "Actually," my father's voice boomed from the end of the hall, strong and clear, cutting through the tension. He walked towards us, his eyes fixed on Eleanor, holding a thick binder in his trembling hand. His face, moments before etched with concern, was now a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He had looked at the reports. He had seen the truth. "Would you care to explain these, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak, holding up the binder containing the original R&D budget reports and transfer confirmations. The original allocation, the actual expenditures, and the fabricated transfers totaling $300,000. Eleanor's face went ashen, her eyes darting between the binder, my father, and me. "Robert, darling, I can explain it's a misunderstanding, fabricated evidence. A disgruntled employee," she stammered, her voice losing its carefully cultivated poise. "Save it, Miss Thorne," a stern voice interjected. 2 agents from the Financial Crimes Unit, accompanied by Sam, stepped off the elevator behind me. They moved with quiet authority, their presence commanding attention. "Miss Thorne, we have reason to believe you've engaged in corporate fraud and theft of company funds, totaling $300,000 from the R&D budget," one of the agents stated, his voice calm and official, holding up documents identifying himself and his partner. "We also have evidence linking you to a wider pattern of financial irregularities and communications with Sterling Corp regarding the weakening of Vance Industries. We'd like to ask you some questions." I watched as Eleanor's carefully constructed world imploded in real time. The whispers of the board members turned into shocked murmurs, then open gasps. My father just stared at the binder, the evidence of her betrayal undeniable, his face a mask of profound pain and regret. Eleanor, cornered, her escape routes cut off, could only glare, her eyes burning with hatred, first at me, then at Sam, then at the agents. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Not fully. Thanksgiving was still looming, a final, unavoidable confrontation that would determine the fate of my family and the company. The boardroom was chaos after Eleanor was led away by the agents, her protests fading down the hallway. The emergency board meeting was postponed indefinitely as news of Eleanor Thornvance's arrest for corporate fraud and theft rippled through the room and out into the building. Then the city, and eventually, the world. The board members, reeling from the shock, bombarded my father and Marcus with questions. My father, looking utterly shattered, the weight of 2 years of deception crushing him, could only offer halting explanations, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't understand," he kept repeating, staring at the budget reports and transfer records Sam and David had provided the agents. "How could I have been so wrong? How could I have let her deceive me like this? $300,000 and more just gone." "She was very good at it, Dad," Marcus said, putting a hand on his shoulder, his own face etched with exhaustion and disbelief. "She played on your trust, on your grief after Mom. She isolated you." "And us," Chloe added, her voice soft, joining us in the now empty boardroom. "We all believed her, Dad. It wasn't just you. She was so convincing." The apology hung in the air, heavy with unspoken hurt, 2 years of distance and doubt between us. "Luna, I am so sorry," my father said, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a pain that mirrored my own. "For not believing you, for everything." The sincerity in his voice was palpable, a first step towards bridging the chasm that had opened between us. But the hurt wasn't erased, not entirely. "We need to talk about Thanksgiving," I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue, the planned confrontation now overshadowed by the morning's events. Would Eleanor even show up? Did it matter if she did? With everything that's happened, Dad asked, confused, as if the world had stopped spinning outside the walls of this boardroom. "Especially because of everything that's happened," Chloe insisted, her voice firm. "We can't hide, Dad, not anymore, not from the truth, not from the media storm that's coming. Canceling Thanksgiving now, it would look like we're trying to bury something else." Marcus nodded in agreement. "The company's reputation is in tatters, Dad. The stock is volatile. We need to project unity, stability, even if it's fragile right now." He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. "She'll be there," Dad said quietly, his gaze distant. "The agents, they released her on bail, pending arraignment." "Good," I replied, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. The idea of facing her again, of denying her the satisfaction of having driven me away permanently, was a powerful motivator. Let her come. That evening, we gathered at my small apartment, the space feeling cramped with the unexpected company Dad, Marcus, Chloe, David, and Sam. The tension was thick, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, anger, and the awkwardness of rediscovering family ties under such dramatic circumstances. We ordered pizza, the mundane comfort of greasy slices a strange counterpoint to the day's events. Sam, ever the pragmatist, was already fielding calls. "Eleanor's lawyers are already trying to control the narrative," she reported, hanging up her phone, claiming she's the victim of a disgruntled former employee and a vengeful stepdaughter making false accusations. They're spinning a story about minor accounting errors and a misunderstanding, trying to downplay the $300,000 as a clerical issue. "She's desperate," David said, wiping grease from his fingers. The Financial Crimes Unit found even more evidence of smaller transfers and hidden accounts, all part of the same pattern. The total diverted funds could be slightly higher than $300,000, but it's the pattern and the connection to Sterling Corp that matters. She's facing serious legal trouble. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Eleanor. The audacity was stunning. "You think you've won, Luna? Thanksgiving will be unforgettable. Hope you're ready for some real family secrets to come out." Marcus read it over my shoulder, his jaw clenching. She's going to try something at dinner, a last-ditch effort to blow everything up. "Let her," I said, a cold calm settling over me, replacing the fear the anonymous texts had once instilled. "We have the truth on our side. She has dirt. We have evidence. Evidence of theft and betrayal." Chloe noted the media frenzy surrounding Vance Industries. Our names, our father's name, Eleanor's name, Sterling Corp., they were everywhere. Dad was being hounded by reporters, which is exactly why Thanksgiving needs to be a display of unity, I finished, meeting Marcus's gaze. One last performance for the world, before the real fallout begins. We spent hours planning, the apartment turning into a makeshift command center. Sam advised on discreetly recording everything, legally permissible in this state with one-party consent. David coordinated with his contacts at the Financial Crimes Unit, ensuring agents would be nearby, ready to act if Eleanor tried anything overtly illegal or made a run for it. Marcus and Chloe, surprisingly adept at strategic thinking under pressure, worked on seating arrangements for Thanksgiving dinner, ensuring Eleanor would be isolated, unable to easily control the conversation or pull someone aside for a private manipulation. Around midnight, just as exhaustion was starting to set in, Dad texted, asking me to come over to the house. Alone. A wave of apprehension washed over me, but I knew I had to go. I found him in his study, the room heavy with the scent of old paper and polished wood. He was sitting in his armchair, surrounded by framed photographs, pictures of my mother, of us kids growing up, moments frozen in time. "She would have known," he murmured, his gaze fixed on a picture of my mother smiling, holding a young Chloe on her hip, Marcus and I hovering nearby. Caroline, she saw people so clearly. She wouldn't have been fooled. He confessed how lost he'd been after Mom's death, how Eleanor seemed to be the stability he craved, the anchor in the storm of his grief, and the pressures of running the company alone. He admitted how he'd let her slowly take control, first of his personal life, then subtly of aspects of the business, because it was easier than confronting his own inadequacies, his own mistakes, the deep loneliness that had settled after Mom was gone. "She manipulated me, Luna," he said, his voice raw with pain and regret. "She exploited my grief, my trust, and it cost the company $300,000 and nearly cost us everything. She manipulated all of us, Dad," I said gently, sitting on the edge of the couch across from him. "She played on our vulnerabilities, on our desire to see you happy again." He nodded, reaching for a worn leather journal on his desk, its cover faded with age. "There's something your mother wrote," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Something Eleanor convinced me to hide. She said it wasn't relevant anymore, about the company's future, about all of you." He handed the journal to me. As I opened it and began to read my mother's elegant script, my heart ached with a profound mix of sorrow and wonder. It wasn't just a personal diary. It was a chronicle of her vision for Vance Industries, a blend of shrewd business insights and deeply held values. She wrote of integrity, innovation, and the importance of family as the bedrock of the company. And then I found it, a hidden message tucked into a secret pocket in the back cover. Instructions to find something in a locked compartment in her old desk at the office, accessible only by a specific date combination, the date of our family's annual trip to the lake house, a tradition Eleanor had stopped almost immediately after she moved in. "She anticipated this, Dad," I whispered, looking up from the journal, tears blurring my vision. "Not specifically Eleanor, maybe, but she knew the company could be vulnerable. She wrote about protecting it, about protecting us. I should have given you this years ago," he said, his voice heavy with regret. I let her make me forget who we were. I left his house at dawn, the journal clutched in my hand, the weight of my mother's legacy and foresight settling deep within me. David was waiting outside my apartment, leaning against his car, sipping from a travel mug. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted, a faint smile touching his lips. "Kept thinking about today. We cooked a quiet Thanksgiving breakfast together. the aroma of spices and roasting turkey filling the small apartment, a stark contrast to the tension that had been our constant companion. It was simple, normal, a brief respite before the storm. "Whatever happens today," he said, looking at me across the kitchen counter, "you've already won, Luna. You brought the truth to light. You fought for what was right." I looked at him, the exhaustion heavy in my eyes. The company was in crisis, my father devastated, Eleanor still a venomous threat. "But you're not alone anymore," he countered, reaching out to gently touch my hand. "You have your family back. You have people who believe in you." Just as he spoke, a group text from Sam pinged on my phone. "New development. Call ASAP. Eleanor just chartered a private jet for tonight. Destination: non-extradition country." She was planning to run. "Not before Thanksgiving dinner," I said, a cold resolve hardening my voice. She was too proud, too arrogant. She'd want one last confrontation, one last chance to hurt us, to try and regain control. The sun was fully risen now, casting long shadows across the kitchen. In a few hours, we would sit down at that table, and the truth would be served, whether she liked it or not. Thanksgiving Day was overcast and cold, a steady drizzle mirroring the grim atmosphere that settled over me as I drove towards my father's house. I wasn't alone. Marcus and Chloe rode with me, their presence a silent strength. David and Sam followed discreetly in a separate car, carrying key pieces of evidence and coordinating with the Financial Crimes Unit agents who would be stationed nearby, ready to act if Eleanor tried anything overtly illegal or made a run for it. "FBI is in position," Sam texted as we pulled up to the house. "3 cars, full surveillance. She makes a run for it, they'll know." The house, a place that held so many warm memories of Thanksgivings past, now felt cold and imposing. It looked the same, decorated for the holiday, but the air inside was thick with unspoken tension, the weight of 2 lost years and the impending confrontation. Thea met us at the door, her face tight with anxiety. "She's here," she whispered, her eyes wide. "In the living room with Dad, acting like nothing happened." We could hear Eleanor's voice, a low, carefully modulated murmur, her laugh, that perfect, practiced sound that had fooled us all for so long, floating down the hallway. "Is everything set?" I asked quietly. Thea nodded. "Marcus has the financial reports ready. Chloe has the communication logs. Sam's equipment is hidden. Dad knows his part." We walked into the living room. Eleanor was perched on the arm of Dad's favorite armchair, looking radiant and utterly out of place in her stunning, deep crimson dress. She was a picture of controlled elegance, a slight, anxious smile playing on her lips. She looked up as we entered, her smile widening, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Luna, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth, holding her hands out as if to embrace me. "So glad you could make it. We were just discussing how important it is to put disagreements aside and focus on family. Especially after the morning's unpleasantness." "Save it, Eleanor," Marcus said flatly from the doorway, his voice devoid of any emotion. "We all know why you're here, and we know about the private jet." Her smile flickered, a brief flash of panic in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. "Can a woman wish for reconciliation, Marcus? Especially after being so unfairly targeted. And as for a jet, can't a woman have backup plans? For a holiday trip?" "Dinner is ready," my father announced, his voice strained, cutting through the thinly veiled hostility. "Let's move to the dining room." The table was set perfectly, every detail meticulous, a reflection of Eleanor's need for control and perfection. The gleaming silverware, the sparkling crystal glasses, the elaborate centerpiece, it all felt absurd, a facade of normalcy over a chasm of betrayal. We took our seats, Dad at the head, Eleanor to his right, me directly across from her, the symbolic divide not lost on anyone. Marcus and Chloe sat beside me, a silent show of support. David and Sam took seats towards the end of the table, observers ready to become participants. "Shall we say grace?" Eleanor suggested sweetly, her hands folded primly in front of her. "Actually," I cut in, my voice clear and steady, commanding the attention of everyone at the table. "Before we begin, I think there's something else we all need to acknowledge. The truth." My father, his face a mask of resolve and sorrow, placed my mother's worn leather journal on the table, sliding it towards the center. Eleanor's perfect mask finally cracked, revealing the venom beneath. "Robert, what are you doing? This is highly inappropriate." "Caroline's vision," Dad said, his voice strong now, filled with a quiet authority I hadn't heard in years. She didn't just leave us a company, Eleanor. She left us principles. Integrity, loyalty, values you clearly hold in contempt. He opened the journal. And she anticipated challenges, challenges from within, challenges from those who would prioritize personal gain over the well-being of this family and this company. He began to read an entry detailing my mother's concerns about potential exploitation, a stark warning about prioritizing profit over people, a passage that seemed eerily prescient now. This is sentimental nonsense, Eleanor scoffed, her voice rising. A dead woman's ramblings, hardly relevant to the pressing financial issues facing the company. Hardly nonsense, Chloe countered, her voice surprisingly firm, pulling out her phone. Because while Mom wrote about integrity, Eleanor was writing about something else entirely. She tapped her phone, and a recording filled the tense silence, not of a confession, but of a recent phone call Eleanor had made. Her voice cold and calculating, discussing the fabricated $300,000 loss from the R&D fund, and promising a Sterling Corp executive that with me out of the way and Robert under her influence, she could facilitate certain transactions beneficial to Sterling Corp. The betrayal was stark, undeniable. Eleanor surged to her feet, her chair scraping back violently against the hardwood floor. You little spies, you set me up. You think this changes anything? This is inadmissible. I still have enough on all of you to expose this family for the dysfunctional, hypocritical mess it is. Her eyes darted around the table, looking for cracks in our united front. She pointed a shaking finger at Dad. Tell them about your secret gambling debts, Robert. Marcus, tell them about your shady investments. Chloe, tell them about your embarrassing indiscretions in college. We already know, Eleanor, I said, my voice quiet but firm, the calm center of the storm. Dad confessed everything. Marcus and Chloe have been honest about their pasts. We're dealing with it, as a family, because that's what families do. We support each other. We forgive each other. Chloe added, her voice thick with emotion, something you wouldn't understand. Eleanor's face contorted with rage, her carefully constructed mask completely shattered. She reached for her wine glass, her hand shaking violently, but knocked it over instead, crimson liquid spreading across the pristine white tablecloth like a spreading stain, a physical manifestation of the mess she had made. This isn't over, she shrieked, glaring at me. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, Sam said, her voice calm and authoritative, walking in from the living room with 2 agents from the Financial Crimes Unit, their presence a stark contrast to the domestic setting. We do, and so do the federal prosecutors. Eleanor looked at the agents, then at the door, a flicker of desperation in her eyes, calculating her chances. Don't, I warned, my voice low. It's over, Eleanor. Running will only make it worse. She straightened her spine, smoothing her crimson dress, a defiant glint in her eyes. I want my lawyer. As the agents escorted her away, her parting glare promised retribution, but it held no power over me anymore. My father sank back into his chair, his head in his hands, the silence in the room heavy after Eleanor's dramatic exit. The spilled wine on the tablecloth was a crimson blotch on the perfect setting. Some Thanksgiving, he murmured, his voice hoarse. Actually, Marcus said, a hint of a smile touching his lips, looking around the table at the family reunited in the face of adversity, I think it was exactly what we needed. A chance to clear the air, to finally be honest, with each other. To be a family again, Chloe added softly, reaching out to take my hand. I looked at the ruined table setting, the empty chair where Eleanor had sat, her presence a toxic cloud now dissipating. So, I said, managing a small smile, the first genuine one in a long time, who wants dessert? The hours after Eleanor's arrest were a blur of hushed phone calls, statements to the Financial Crimes Unit agents, and the quiet presence of law enforcement ensuring Eleanor didn't attempt to flee before her arraignment. By midnight, the house was finally empty except for us Dad, Marcus, Chloe, David, and Sam. We sat in the living room, the weight of the day settling in, exhausted but unable to sleep. The media was in a frenzy, the story of Eleanor Thorne Vance, socialite and fraud suspect, dominating the news cycle. But Marcus reported the company's stock was stabilizing, even showing a slight uptick in after-hours trading. Market likes that we caught the fraud early, he said, scrolling through financial news on his phone. Early, I couldn't help but laugh, a slightly hysterical sound. It's been 2 years. Could have been worse, Luna, Sam said, packing up her recording equipment, tucking cables and devices into a nondescript bag. She was planning to continue draining funds. $300,000 from R&D was just one part of it. The pattern was accelerating. Dad stood by the fireplace, gazing at my mother's portrait hanging above the mantelpiece, her gentle smile a source of comfort in the chaos. "I have so much to fix," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "You already started, Dad," Chloe assured him, going to stand beside him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "The truth is out now. That's what matters most." A text came from David's financial crimes contact. Eleanor was cooperating, cutting deals, naming names, providing details about her network and her connection to Connor Sterling and Sterling Corp's strategy. She wouldn't be walking away from this easily. Just as we were contemplating the long road ahead, the doorbell rang. We exchanged a quick, uneasy glance, but Sam, checking her security app connected to the house's system, relaxed. "It's just David," she said, "and he's brought pizza." "Thought we could use some real food," David said, walking in with a stack of pizza boxes, a welcome aroma filling the air, since the turkey got cold during all the excitement. As we gathered around the coffee table, pizza and leftover wine between us, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by a weary camaraderie. Dad cleared his throat, drawing our attention. "There's something else we need to discuss. The company." Marcus tensed, bracing himself. "The board wants an emergency meeting tomorrow morning to address the crisis." "Yes," Dad said, looking at each of us in turn, his gaze steady. "But this is about more than the crisis. This is about leadership. Your mother, she believed in the next generation, in all of you." He confessed his reliance on Eleanor, how he'd let her subtly steer the company because it was easier than confronting his own inadequacies, his grief, the immense pressure. "I've been hiding, Luna," he admitted, his voice raw. "Hiding from my mistakes, letting her take control because it was easier than facing what I'd done, what I'd allowed to happen to this family." "We all made mistakes, Dad," Chloe said softly, moving to sit on the couch beside him, taking his hand. "We all believed her. We were grieving." "Not all of us," Marcus said, looking at me, his expression one of respect and regret. "Luna saw through it, and we didn't listen." "That's in the past, Marcus," I said, wanting to move forward, not dwell on the hurt. But Dad shook his head. "No, it's not. We need to acknowledge it, and it starts with your position, Luna." My heart skipped a beat. After everything, was he going to sideline me again? "My position. The board," he said, a faint smile touching his lips, "wants you back. As CEO." Silence fell over the room. Even Sam paused in her packing. I can't," I stammered, the idea overwhelming. "Leading Vance Industries, especially now, in the wake of such a scandal." "You can, Luna," Marcus insisted, leaning forward. "You're the only one who saw through Eleanor, the only one who fought for the truth for the company. You saved us. The shareholders will support you," Dad added, "especially after today, but there's a condition, your mother's condition." He looked at Marcus and Chloe. "She wanted you to lead together, all of you, each with your own strengths. Marcus in operations, Chloe in development, Luna as the overall leader, a team, a partnership. A triumvirate," David mused, a grin spreading across his face. "Actually makes perfect sense from a business perspective. And from a family one." My phone buzzed again, an email from the board. Subject: Urgent Emergency Meeting Agenda, Leadership Transition and Crisis Response. 9:00 a.m. They weren't waiting. "Then we better be ready," Marcus said, the weariness in his voice replaced by a steely resolve. "The press, the investigations, the audits, they were all coming." "Let them," Chloe said firmly, her gaze steady. "We have nothing to hide anymore." Dad went to his desk and returned with 3 small, leather-bound notebooks. "Your mother wrote these," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "One for each of you. She asked me to give them to you when you were ready to lead, when you were ready to step up." With trembling hands, we each took our mother's journals. Mine felt heavy, filled with her familiar script, a tangible link to the woman who had shaped us all. "Read them later," Dad said softly, "when you're ready." In 8 hours, we'd face the board. In 24, the story would be everywhere. In a week, the legal battles and internal investigations would begin. The road ahead was daunting, filled with challenges I couldn't even anticipate. Whatever happens, I said, looking at my family, my small circle of allies, the people who had chosen to believe in me, to fight alongside me, we face it together. This time, together, they echoed, the word a promise, a vow. Sam finished packing up her equipment. At the door, she paused, turning back to look at us. For what it's worth, she said, a rare, genuine smile touching her lips, this is the best possible ending, Luna. Truth wins, family reunites. Justice? Well, justice is a process, but it started. Is it really ending, Sam? I asked, the question hanging in the air. She smiled again. No, Luna, it's just the beginning. The hard part is rebuilding. The trust, the company, your lives. But you have the most important thing Eleanor never had. What's that? People who actually care about each other, she said softly, not just about power or money. With a nod, she was gone. Towards the end of the meeting with the board, after they had unanimously approved the leadership transition and the initial steps for crisis management, Dad stood up, his face still showing the strain of the past few days, but with a new light in his eyes. Before we adjourn, he said, his voice clear, there's one more thing. He led us out of the boardroom and down the hall to my mother's old office, a space that had remained untouched since her death, even by Eleanor. It was like stepping back in time, the same furniture, the same books on the shelves, even the half-empty coffee mug on her desk. Your mother's journals, he said softly, handing us each our respective notebooks. She left them for you. For when you were ready to lead, read them here. My hands shook as I opened my mother's journal, the pages filled with her familiar script, a blend of business strategies and personal reflections. She wrote of resilience, of integrity, of the importance of family as the core of Vance Industries. And then I found it, a hidden message tucked into a secret pocket in the back cover. Instructions to find something in a locked compartment in her desk, accessible only by a specific date combination. The date of our family's annual trip to the lake house, a tradition Eleanor had stopped almost immediately after she moved in. The compartment clicked open. Inside was a small, intricately carved wooden box, and another note from my mother, for the three of you, not for the company, for your souls. The box contained 3 tarnished keys to the lake house, which Eleanor had claimed was sold years ago. She hadn't. In her foresight, my mother had quietly ensured it remained ours, a sanctuary untouched by corporate maneuvering or toxic relationships. She knew, Marcus whispered, tears in his eyes, she knew we'd need a place just for us, a reminder of who we were before the lies, before the betrayal. A knock on the door interrupted us. David. Luna, urgent update, Eleanor's talking. Cutting deals with the authorities. Naming everyone involved, including Connor Sterling and the Sterling Corp executives she colluded with. They're estimating the total funds siphoned could be closer to $400,000, not just the $300,000 from R&D. Let her talk, I replied, the lake house keys warm in my hand, my mother's journal a comforting weight. We have nothing left to hide. Every penny she took, the authorities will find. Dad cleared his throat. He should leave, he said. This was our moment, the next generation taking the reins. Stay, Dad, I said, reaching for his hand. Please. We need you, your experience, your guidance. We need to face this together. He laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound I hadn't heard in years. Just maybe not your taste in wives, Marcus added, a grin spreading across his face. Dad chuckled, the tension easing. Sam texted photos of Eleanor in custody, looking nothing like the polished socialite who had tormented us. The PR team was ready. It was time to face the press, to tell our story to the world. Wait, I said, touching my mother's journal, then the lake house keys. One last thing. I pulled out my phone and booked train tickets to the lake house for the upcoming weekend. We have a company to rebuild, Luna, Marcus protested, practical as always. It can wait 2 days, I replied, looking at my siblings, at my father, at David and Sam, my chosen family. While we remember who we are. As a family, before we face the world. Walking towards the press conference, I felt my mother's journal in my pocket, the lake house keys in my hand, and her strength, her vision in my heart. We approached the podium together, not just as CEO and executives, but as siblings, as a family, united and stronger for having faced the darkness. Ready? Marcus whispered beside me. I looked at my family, at Dad standing proudly behind us, his face etched with regret but also hope, at David giving me a thumbs up from beside Sam. silent support radiating from them. "Ready," I said, stepping up to the microphone, the bright lights of the cameras illuminating our faces. Time to tell our story. Because that's what it was about. Not just exposing a fraud, reclaiming a company, or seeking justice. It was about reclaiming our narrative. Eleanor Thornvance tried to write our ending, a tragic tale of betrayal and ruin. But she only gave us the motivation, the catalyst, to write our own beginning. I smiled at the cameras, at my siblings, at my father, at the future stretching before us, uncertain but filled with possibility. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and strong. "Let me tell you about Vance Industries, about family, about the truth, and about coming home." The cameras flashed, the reporters leaned in, and I told our story, all of it. Knowing that somewhere my mother was finally at peace, her legacy not just a company, but a family reunited, strong and true.